They told me there wasn't enough room, not in the house my father built, not in the family I was born into, and certainly not at the Christmas table I helped set since I was 5. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger. My sister whispered something cruel, and I stood there with my daughter's tiny hand gripping mine, pretending not to cry. I left that night with nothing but a single suitcase and a promise. They'd regret every word they said, because when life shut the door, I built a mansion. When they laughed at my struggles, I built an empire. And when Christmas came again, I made sure they were the ones left outside, staring through the glass at what they threw away. Where are you watching from tonight? Because this is the story of how I turned their rejection into my revenge. Before that night, I still believed that family meant something, that blood could forgive what pride refused to see. I was the second daughter, the quiet one, the helper, the one who never asked for too much. My sister Olivia was always the favorite, radiant, ambitious, flawless in every way that looked good in family photos. I was the shadow beside her, the girl with scraped knees and big dreams, the one who thought love could make up for what money couldn't. When I got married, I thought I'd finally escaped that comparison. My husband, Daniel, was charming to charming. In hindsight, he made promises about a house, about security, about a future where Lily and I would never have to depend on anyone. But promises are just words, and words are cheap when spoken by someone who never planned to keep them. The day he left, he didn't even say goodbye. I came home from work to find his closet empty and a note on the counter that said, "You'll be fine, you always are." He left me with debts, an eviction notice, and a baby barely learning to walk. With nowhere else to go, I packed 2 suitcases, strapped Lily into her car seat, and drove back to my parents' house. I remember pulling into the driveway, the same one where my dad used to teach me how to ride a bike, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, they'd open the door and wrap me in their arms. But the welcome I got was nothing like that. Olivia answered the door, wearing a silk robe and holding a wine glass like she owned the place. Her first words weren't, "I missed you," or "Are you okay?" They were, "Oh, you're back." Behind her, the house was lit up with warmth garlands on the banister, cinnamon candles burning, laughter from the living room where her husband and my parents watched a movie. I forced a smile. "Just until I find work," I said softly. She sighed. "Mom and Dad didn't mention this." When my mother appeared, she smiled politely. The kind of tight smile you give a stranger. "Of course, dear, you can stay for a while." That while turned into conditions. I couldn't use the upstairs bathroom because it was Olivia's private space. I couldn't park in the driveway. Lily couldn't touch the piano or the Christmas ornaments because they are delicate. Still, I tried. I found a job at a small diner off Highway 70, working early shifts before dawn. I came home tired, smelling like coffee and pancakes, but I always carried a smile for Lily. I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better. But the longer I stayed, the more invisible I became. Every morning, my father sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper while Olivia talked about her new business ventures. He never asked how my job was. My mother would nod along, pretending not to notice the way Olivia's words sliced through me like glass. I overheard them one night, my parents and Olivia in the living room, their voices carrying through the vent above my bed. "She should be on her own by now," my father said. "She's not a child," my mother added, "and she's not contributing much." Olivia finished. I lay there, holding Lily close, pretending to sleep as the tears silently soaked into her blanket. The next morning, I started putting away money. Every tip, every extra hour. I skipped lunch just to save a few more dollars. I didn't know what I was saving for, just that I needed a way out. But life has a cruel sense of timing. 2 weeks before Christmas, Lily got sick. High fever, hospital visits, bills I couldn't pay. I asked my parents for help, not for myself, but for her. My mother sighed and said, "We've already helped enough." My father didn't look up from his paper. Olivia stood by the counter, swirling her wine glass. "Maybe you should have thought about all this before having a kid." That was the first time I ever yelled at her. I told her she was heartless, that she had no idea what struggle meant. She smirked. "Struggle? You mean the mess you made of your own life?" After that, I stopped talking to her altogether. Still, I wanted Lily to have one good Christmas one night where she could feel loved, surrounded by lights and laughter. So I spent my savings on small gifts, a dollhouse for Lily, a scarf for my mother, a new tie for my father, and a silver bracelet for Olivia. I baked cookies, wrapped everything carefully, and even wore the same red dress I'd worn at family Christmases years ago. On Christmas Eve, I stood outside their door in the snow, gifts in hand, Lily bundled in her coat beside me. The lights glowed warmly inside, music floated through the air, and for a moment, I believed maybe they'd changed their minds. But when the door opened, it was Olivia again. Her husband stood behind her, smirking like he knew something cruel. Her eyes flicked over me and the bags in my hands. "Oh, you didn't get the message." My heart started to sink. "What message?" She smiled. "There's no room for you this year. Mum and Dad want a quiet Christmas. Just family." "Olivia," I whispered. "We are family." Her tone turned sharp. "Not anymore. You've made this house uncomfortable." Dad said, "It's time for you to figure things out on your own." Through the doorway, I saw my father by the fireplace, staring at the television like he couldn't even hear us. My mother stood beside him, adjusting ornaments, pretending to be busy. She didn't look at me. "Please," I said, "just for Lily." Olivia cut me off. "Don't make this a scene. Go." I don't remember walking away. I just remember the sound of the door closing, soft, final, and the way Lily's small voice whispered, "Mommy, why can't we stay?" I told her the only thing I could, because sometimes people forget how to love. That night, we stayed in a small motel on the edge of town. The room smelled like cigarettes, and the heater barely worked. But Lily fell asleep clutching the doll I'd bought her. I sat by the window, watching the snowfall, and I realized something. Family isn't defined by who shares your name. It's defined by who shows up when the world turns cold. I made a promise that night one I whispered to the dark while my daughter slept beside me. One day I'll build a home so warm, so full of light, that my daughter will never know what rejection feels like. And when that day comes, they'll see what they threw away. The morning after that Christmas, I woke up before dawn. The motel window was fogged, and the cold was cruel enough to remind me where I was. Nowhere, and with no one. I looked at my daughter sleeping beside me, her tiny hand still holding that doll, and something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger yet, it was resolve. The kind that builds in silence. I took a deep breath, packed our things, and drove into the city as the sun began to rise. I didn't have a plan, only a promise. I stopped at every diner, every cafe, every shop that had a help wanted sign. Nobody was hiring too close to the holidays, they said, but one small bakery, tucked behind a gas station, needed a part-time cleaner. It wasn't much, but it was something. The owner was an elderly woman named Margaret, with kind eyes and flour on her apron. She looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You've got that look of someone who's been told no too many times." I nodded, unable to speak. "Fine," she smiled. "Come in tomorrow. We'll find something for you to do." And she did. That bakery became my sanctuary. The smell of cinnamon rolls, the hum of the old oven, the clatter of trays. It all gave me something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I cleaned tables, wiped counters, helped decorate pastries, and when Margaret realized I had a knack for design, she taught me how to bake. We'd stay late, talking over steaming mugs of cocoa, while Lily played with cookie cutters in the corner. Margaret became like the mother I wished I'd had. She didn't care about my past, my failures, or my family's coldness. She only cared that I showed up, worked hard, and smiled when I could. Under her guidance, I learned more than recipes. I learned resilience. Months passed. Lily started school nearby. We rented a small one-bedroom apartment above a thrift shop. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Every night, I'd tuck her in and whisper, "We're building something, baby, just wait." When summer came, Margaret fell ill. Her children wanted to sell the bakery. It broke her heart. She pulled me aside one evening and said, "If anyone deserves to keep this place alive, it's you." She offered to sell it to me for a fraction of its worth, a kindness I couldn't accept at first. But she smiled and said, "You're not taking, you're earning," so I did. I took a small business loan, signed the papers trembling, and overnight I went from cleaner to owner. The first night I held those keys, I cried in the empty kitchen. I renamed it Lily's Hearth because my daughter was my reason for everything. I worked harder than ever. I painted the walls, upgraded the ovens, redesigned the menu, and started posting photos of our pastries online. People loved them. The look, the taste, the warmth that came with every story I shared. Baked with heart, born from hardship, I'd write in every caption. Within months, we had lines out the door. Then something wild happened. A local journalist wrote a piece about the single mother who turned her life around through baking. It went viral in our city. We got catering requests, investor calls, and invitations to local fairs. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving, I was living, but as success grew, so did curiosity. My parents called one afternoon out of the blue. My mother's voice was hesitant, sweet in that practiced way. "We saw your name in the paper," she said. "We're proud of you, honey." I almost laughed, proud. The same people who told me there was no room for me suddenly wanted to sound supportive. I thanked her politely, said we were doing well, and hung up. My hands shook. Not from anger, but from disbelief. A week later, Olivia called. She said she wanted to stop by and see the bakery. Her tone dripped with curiosity, not affection. I told her no, we were too busy. She laughed and said, "Come on, don't be ridiculous. It's family." Family, that word again, the one they twisted until it meant nothing. Instead, I poured my focus into expansion. I opened a second location 6 months later, this one downtown, in a district full of the kind of people who once looked down on me. We hosted charity events, gave out free treats on holidays, and sponsored local schools. People started calling me the heart of the city. It was surreal. Then, one December, a year to the day since that night in the snow, I was invited to cater the annual City Christmas Gala, a high-end event for business owners and local dignitaries. It was the kind of thing Olivia and her husband always bragged about attending. I accepted immediately. The night of the gala, I wore a white satin dress and diamond earrings that Margaret had gifted me before she passed. Lily, now 8, helped me tie my hair up and said, "You look like a princess, Mommy." I smiled and whispered, "No, sweetheart, I look like someone who made it." When we arrived at the venue, I noticed the familiar faces, city officials, CEOs, and at one corner table, my parents. My father's grey hair looked thinner, my mother's smile smaller, and right beside them sat Olivia and her husband, laughing with champagne glasses in hand. When they saw me, their expressions froze. For a second, they didn't recognize me. Then Olivia's jaw tightened and she forced a polite smile. "Well, look who it is," she muttered when I passed by. I didn't stop. I simply smiled back, greeted the mayor, and continued walking. The looks I got, admiration, respect, curiosity, they were everything I'd once begged for, but now they were mine on my own terms. Later that night, when I walked onto the stage to receive an award for Outstanding Local Business of the Year, I looked straight at my family's table. My father lowered his gaze, my mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Olivia's smile had vanished. I gave my speech slowly, every word deliberate. This isn't just about business. It's about rebuilding after being told you're not enough. It's about finding warmth when the people you love shut you out. It's about turning pain into purpose. The crowd clapped, but I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to the people who once told me there was no room. After the event, Olivia approached me outside. Snow fell softly, just like that night years ago. "You really did well for yourself," she said, her voice cautious. "Mom and Dad want to apologize. You should come by for Christmas dinner this year. We'll make room." There it was. The same family that left me freezing in the dark now wanted to share my light. I looked at her and smiled. "Thank you," I said softly, "but we already have plans. My home's full." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I said. "There's no room." Her face paled. That Christmas, Lily and I hosted our own dinner at the bakery. We invited single mothers, local workers, people with no families to go home to. The tables were full of laughter, warmth, and the kind of love my parents never gave. I stood by the window as snow fell outside, remembering that motel room, that empty feeling, and realizing I'd built everything I ever wanted without them. But my revenge wasn't done. It wasn't about screaming or proving a point. It was about legacy. So I decided to take it one step further. I bought a property, a large old house just a few streets away from my parents. I renovated it into a women's shelter and named it the Hearth Home. Its mission was to help single mothers get back on their feet, to give warmth where others had been denied it. When the shelter opened, I sent invitations to the ribbon-cutting ceremony to everyone in the neighborhood, including my parents and Olivia. I didn't know if they'd come, but they did. They stood at the edge of the crowd as I gave my speech. I talked about family, forgiveness, and how kindness grows when love is given freely. "Some doors close," I said, "but sometimes that's just life telling you to build your own." When the crowd applauded, I caught my mother's gaze. She was crying quietly. My father's expression was unreadable. Olivia looked lost, like she finally realized what she'd thrown away. That day, I didn't feel anger, just peace, because I finally understood revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's standing tall in the light while the people who broke you drown in their own shadows. It had been 3 years since that snowy night on the porch. 3 years since my family closed the door and left me standing in the cold with my daughter. 3 years since I made the promise that I would rise without them. Now, my name was everywhere. Lily's Hearth wasn't just a bakery anymore. It had become a symbol. We'd expanded to 6 locations across the state. Local newspapers called me the woman who baked her way back from nothing. But fame never mattered to me. What mattered was watching my daughter run through the store every morning, greeting customers and laughing without fear. That sound, her laughter, was the sound of everything I'd fought for. But life, I've learned, has a way of bringing the past back around when you least expect it. It started with a call from Olivia. Her voice trembled, something I'd never heard before. "Can we talk?" she said quietly. "It's about Mum and Dad." I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to hang up. But something, maybe habit, maybe curiosity, made me say yes. We met at a small cafe downtown. When I walked in, she looked different. The arrogance in her posture was gone, replaced by exhaustion. Her makeup couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. "They losing the house," she said, voice cracking. "Dad made some bad investments. The bank's taking everything." I said nothing. They won't admit it, but they're scared. They don't have anywhere to go. She looked at me, almost pleading. "You have that shelter, right? The Hearth home? Maybe." Her voice trailed off. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I stirred my coffee slowly. "So you want me to take them in after they turned me away?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, I know it's too much to ask, but they're our parents." I leaned back, my heart pounding with memories. The porch, the snow, Lily's small voice asking why we couldn't stay, the silence that followed. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I smiled softly. "The Hearth home isn't mine anymore, Olivia. It belongs to the women who need it, not the ones who chose pride over love." She flinched like the words had struck her. "So you're really just going to let them suffer?" I met her gaze. "They let a child sleep in the cold. I'm not letting them suffer, Olivia. I'm just not saving them from the consequences they created." She left in tears. I sat there for a while, listening to the sound of rain, hitting the window, wondering why my heart didn't ache the way it used to. Maybe healing really does dull the pain. Or maybe I'd finally learned to stop bleeding for people who never cared if I lived or died. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, I was closing up the bakery when I saw 2 familiar figures standing outside. My parents. They looked small. My father's coat was worn. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched a faded handbag. "Can we talk?" she whispered. I let them in. The smell of bread filled the room, warm and comforting. Everything that House on the Hill had never been. My father cleared his throat. "We've lost the house, the business, everything." His voice cracked for the first time in my life. "We were proud of you, you know. We just didn't know how to say it." I looked at him carefully. "You didn't need words, Dad. You had choices." My mother began to cry. "We were wrong about everything. About you, about him." She looked toward Lily, who was decorating cookies in the corner. "We just want to make things right before it's too late." For a moment, I felt that old ache again, the one that makes you want to forgive, to go back, to pretend the past didn't happen. But then I remembered the way my daughter had shivered in that motel room, the way my hands had cracked from washing dishes just to feed her. "You can't make it right," I said gently, "but you can learn from it." I walked them out into the night, stood with them under the same kind of falling snow that once fell on me. "You see that light?" I pointed toward the shelter down the street. "That's the Hearth Home. There are women in there who've lost everything and are still finding the courage to rebuild. If you want redemption, go there. Volunteer. Help them. That's how you make it right." My father nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. My mother whispered, "We will." And for the first time, I believed her. But life wasn't done teaching lessons. A few months later, a massive community event was held to celebrate small businesses that changed lives. They called it the Hearts of the City Gala. Every major figure in town was there: investors, media, mayors, and philanthropists. I was one of the keynote speakers. When I walked into the hall, the chandeliers glimmered like starlight. I wore a crimson gown, the same shade as the dress I wore the night I was turned away from my family's home. Only this time, it wasn't a symbol of pain. It was a crown. As I walked up to the stage, the host introduced me. "Tonight we honor a woman who turned rejection into renewal, heartbreak into hope, and built not just a business, but a movement." The applause was thunderous, and then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw them, my family, sitting at a small table near the back. They looked older, smaller, humbled. My father's hand clutched my mother's. Olivia sat beside them, quiet, no makeup this time, her face bare and human. When I reached the podium, I looked at them directly, not with hatred, but with calm. "3 years ago," I began, "I was told there was no room for me. I thought that was the end of my story, but it was the beginning. Because sometimes when people shut you out, the universe is making space for you to build something bigger." The crowd went silent. Cameras flashed. Every eye was on me. "I built my own table," I said. "And now there's room for anyone who needs warmth, anyone who was told they weren't enough." The applause came again, louder this time. But my eyes were still on my parents. My mother cried openly. My father looked down, his shoulders shaking, and Olivia, for the first time in her life, clapped for me. After the event, they approached me quietly. My father's voice was hoarse. "We're volunteering at the Hearth Home," he said. "It's humbling. Thank you for showing us what family really means." My mother hugged me then, fragile, trembling, genuine. "You became everything we weren't," she whispered. "And I'm so proud of you." I didn't say anything. I just hugged her back, because forgiveness isn't something you say, it's something you grow into. When they left, I looked at Lily. She smiled up at me with the innocence only children have. "You're happy now, Mommy," she said. I knelt beside her and smiled. "Yes, baby, I am." That night, as snow fell outside my window again, I thought about how everything had come full circle. I'd built warmth out of coldness, love out of rejection, strength out of pain. My revenge had never been about destroying them, it had been about outgrowing them, and that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Years have passed since that night when my family stood outside the bakery, shivering in the cold. So much has changed, but every December I still think about that evening, on the porch. The snow falling, my daughter's small hand in mine, the sound of a door closing behind us. Back then, I thought it was the sound of failure. Now, I know it was the sound of rebirth. Lily's hearth has grown into something bigger than I ever dreamed. We now have 11 bakeries across the state, a training program for single mothers, and a scholarship fund for their children. I don't do it for praise. I do it because I know what it feels like to have nothing and to build everything from the ground up. I visit the women's shelter every week. I talk with mothers who've lost everything but still wake up every morning determined to try again. I see myself in each of them, tired eyes but burning hope. My parents never got their old house back. They live modestly now in a small apartment not far from the first bakery. My father volunteers at the hearth home every weekend, fixing broken furniture and teaching kids how to read. My mother runs the kitchen there, helping women cook and bake. Every time I visit, she hugs me like she's trying to make up for every moment she didn't before. The guilt never truly leaves her eyes, but I don't need it to, because forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did. It's about deciding their mistakes no longer have the power to define you. Olivia changed too. Her husband left her, the same way mine once did. Life has a way of circling back like that, not to punish, but to teach. When she came to me, years later, asking for a job at the bakery, I said yes, not because she deserved it, but because I did. Because my peace would never come from her suffering. It would come from proving to myself that I could rise above the same cruelty that once broke me. Now, she manages one of the branches. She works hard, stays late, and never speaks ill of anyone. I see her look at me sometimes with quiet regret, the kind that doesn't need words. And I see her watch Lily, now a teenager, full of confidence and joy, and realize what love truly looks like when it's unconditional. Every Christmas Eve, Lily and I still host our dinner at the bakery. The tables are lined with candles and fresh bread. There's laughter, music, and warmth so strong you can feel it from the street. We open the doors to anyone, the lonely, the lost, the forgotten, and there's always room for one more chair. Because that's what I learned. The same door that once shut in my face taught me to open every other door wide. Sometimes I'll see my parents walking quietly, carrying desserts they've baked themselves. My mother will find me in the crowd, smile softly, and whisper, "Merry Christmas, my girl." And in that moment, the years of pain fade like melting snow, not because everything is perfect, but because I made peace with the imperfection. When I stand by the window each year, watching the snow fall, I no longer feel cold. I feel gratitude. I look at Lily, beautiful, strong, kind, and I think about how far we've come. The motel rooms, the hunger, the humiliation, they all built us into something stronger. They taught me that revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes the best revenge is to build such a beautiful life that it silences every cruel word ever spoken against you. I no longer crave their approval. I no longer chase their love. I am enough because I built my own world where there's always room, always warmth, always light. And every time the snow begins to fall, I whisper the same words to myself, the same words that started it all. There may not have been room for me in their home, but I made room for the world.